right now in razor-thin margins in all 7 of the battlegrounds, Kristen.
Well, Gabe, speaking of those blue wall states, a Michigan Democrat told me they are nauseously optimistic. So it gives you a sense of how close this race is.
Nauseously, yes.
Exactly.
We're hearing that a lot, too.
Yeah, it's how close this race is. Let's talk.
All right, guys, today we're going to be watching the NBC Election Meltdown, and it's a great one. Keep watching to the end and give us a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and let's get it on.
Guess what? The 20 to 35-year-old bros, they're not watching your television advertising either. And so your message to them has to be really refined. And Joe Rogan coming out as late as what he did, I think, doesn't really help them. And these are low propensity voters that he's trying to target. But if you look at Trump's closing argument, he keeps stepping on his most important message, which is we're on the wrong track. We could fix it. The signs are right. But she gives a message of hope and the future, and we aren't going back. And I think that's valuable.
And now on the most important issue, look at that in bright pink there. 36% of voters say the most important issue to them is the state of democracy, not the economy as the top issue. That is right there at number 2 at 30%, the economy. Abortion, 14%, followed by immigration. Chuck?
Immigration's where?
We're not overreading into it, but we do want to tell you what we know as we're
directionally, if this is what this electorate is saying, you would be, and the Harris campaign will be ecstatic that that's the direction right now of where things are at.
Peter, talk to me about how the Harris campaign is feeling. I know you've been reporting all day about sort of their momentum and sort of maybe a changing of mood. They were feeling a bit more positive today.
Yeah, not just positive today. They've been feeling increasingly confident over the course of the last several days. Let's look at that favorability number, though, for a moment. And Kamala Harris, she performs better than both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 4 points ahead of Donald Trump, 7 points ahead of Joe Biden. Right now, his number's coming down. Her number is particularly high in their view right now and higher than the man with whom she served, Joe Biden. So that's something they're feeling, I think, good about. This is her alma mater at Howard University. The early indications, at least in the eyes of the Harris campaign, are good ones, specifically as it relates to the turnout among young voters.
Trump has said for the duration of this campaign, and especially in its closing days, that he believes the only way he could lose is if there is some kind of cheating out across these battleground states. We'll be watching to see what else he has to say about it tonight.
Worrying the Harris camp right now, looking at it from the other end of the glass.
Well, the lines are very long, and they want people to stay in line, Lester.
Stay in line.
I'm told that actually in Pennsylvania specifically, celebrities are FaceTiming in to the people who are in line, encouraging them to stay in line. So the organizers are out there with the phones saying, "Hey, so and so is on the line." There are concerts actually happening. They are looking at Pennsylvania very closely. And as the time that the vice president spent in the state, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I think is also indicative of where they see some gaps. Also, obviously, DeKalb County, in Georgia, the lines, the polling locations were staying open longer because of the bomb threats that were happening there and the evacuations that had to happen, encouraging people to know that it is safe to vote, stay in line, make your voice count. I think they want to ensure, they feel like that they can eke it out if people turned out to vote and stay in line.
All right.
They're pointing to our exit poll, which shows Donald Trump more than doubling his support among African Americans in Wisconsin. I cannot emphasize enough how much this has been an emphasis for the Trump campaign to try to improve their margins.
And how's the feeling there? What's the vibe?
Well, there's still a celebratory feel here right now. They're waiting for any particular data points that they can know if it's a good indication or not. The Harris campaign individuals still watching behind closed doors. The vice president watching alongside family and friends tonight. A lot of the donors and other big supporters of the vice president's at a hotel here in Washington, D.C. watching as well before they arrive here a little bit later this evening. I'll tell you some of the data points that they are pointing to right now as potentially some good indicators. One comes out of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. They think that's a good indication. It's a message that they're sharing right now, FaceTiming in Jennifer Gardner and Demi Moore, among others, to keep those folks in line.
All right, Peter.
Simone was making that point a moment ago about it. They can keep them in line.
You can keep them in line if Jennifer Garner's on the other line talking to your mom or Paulette, and that's the strategy there. We've got a race to call here.
But it just changed. That's how fast voting data is coming in. Again, I love. So her easiest path is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. She holds that blue wall. If she can do that, she gets to 270. If she's having a very rough night and she loses Pennsylvania, loses Michigan, loses Wisconsin, she has other paths, but she does have a Sun Belt path where if she can flip North Carolina, hold Georgia, hold Arizona, and get Nevada, hold it once again. She gets her as well. That path, though, would give Democrats heart palpitations. As far as former President Trump, his easiest route, just think of the east side. He holds Pennsylvania. He flips Pennsylvania. He holds North Carolina. He flips Georgia back. He gets to 270. But if he can't win Pennsylvania, he has to win somewhere else in the blue wall. He has to break through the blue wall. That's the main difference between his path and the vice president's path.
One more point just to mention as we watch all of these returns come in. When President Biden was at the top of the ticket, a state like North Carolina was out of reach for Democrats. The fact that we're talking about it right now, the fact that there's been so much play in North Carolina, that former President Trump spent so much time there in recent days, underscores the fact that they have tried to open up more paths, and we'll have to see if that was effective.
I want to ask
2020, which has to concern the Harris campaign. And we feel really good about their ground operation. They have the best ground operation person in American politics, and Jen O'Malley Dillon is the chair, who has built a $1 billion field campaign for this moment. And
She's
they're
knocking
really
on doors.
going for it on the college campuses, and they kind of need it right now.
Jim.
Sven, I've been talking to Trump campaign officials, and look, we all know the cliche on election days where you hear campaign sources say they're feeling cautiously optimistic. What has happened in the last half hour is my sources have stopped using the word cautious to describe their optimism. They are feeling increasingly confident as more and more votes come in, despite the fact that no battlegrounds have been called, that their theory of the case is being proven correct. And what I mean by that is the Trump campaign set out at the beginning of this race to expand the Republican Party. They knew they couldn't win with their old coalition. They had to get more younger voters, more black voters, more Latino voters, even by small amounts, to join their coalition. In the battleground states, they are seeing that happen. And if it does happen, it would be a historic realignment of the parties. Now, again, none of these battlegrounds have been called, but with all the battleground states now closed, the voting is done, except for the folks who are waiting in line. They feel like there's not much else left for them to do but watch and wait in an increasingly optimistic atmosphere, both here at West Palm Beach and at Mar-a-Lago, where Trump and his closest allies, friends, and family.
If they're looking at the map right now and you're a Republican, you're probably feeling a little bit better. But again, I just want to say it's still so early in the night, and there's still a lot of vote out. Philadelphia County, just because this was brought up on the set earlier, 62% of the vote is in. Biden was at 81. She's at 77. A lot of the vote is still out. But again, she wants to be in the same high watermarks where Biden is, guys.
Yeah, Mark, you think there's not enough vote for her to make up that margin?
Well, there's still a lot out there. I'm just saying all of these things start to add up. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And so
it is independents. Doesn't mean he's winning them, but he's doing better than he was 4 years ago. Here's where her improvement is, and this is interesting. It's with seniors. It's with voters over the age of 65, and we're starting to see that trend for her.
You pointed to me when you said seniors.
No, oh my gosh, Savannah.
And I just want to let everyone know that we noticed.
It deflected off your shoulder and hit me squarely.
Full disclosure, we talked about it in the commercial break like 2 hours ago, so it was more of a callback to something that I forgot we didn't say on the air because we're chit-chatting constantly.
Age
but the seniors piece of it is interesting because think about who actually gets out and votes, right? Who is more likely to get out there and vote? It is seniors. So there's some fascinating dynamics at play, and as we're all talking about, 10:40, we're only on our first cup of coffee.
I think one of the dynamics at play as we watch these results come in that's so fascinating, you think about how close, what a tough slog Pennsylvania is as we watch this come in, and you think about that decision that she made to have Walz as her running mate.
Thought he was a manly man.
As opposed to Governor Josh Shapiro. So as we watch this come in, and even on the day that she made that announcement, a lot of people questioned, what would Pennsylvania look like with Shapiro on the ticket?
Camouflage hats.
Folks are thinking
well,
about
I mean,
that.
if she loses Pennsylvania, you can guarantee that story is already being written. I mean, Senator McCaskill, Josh Shapiro has, even in pretty red counties, is a very popular governor.
He didn't want to be on the ticket.
But so is Tim Walz in the Midwest.
Yeah, tampon
And
Tim.
I think what her decision was, one of judgment, where she looked at somebody who had a resume just like hers, and she looked at someone who was much different. He wasn't Ivy League. He wasn't all smooth. He was relatable and a coach.
Relatable to who?
Somebody who really kind of oozed Midwestern relatability. And I think she thought was an add plus as opposed to just a mirror of who she was. And, I don't know if it was the right call or not. I think they're both terrific people. Either way, they're going to be around. Shapiro's not going anywhere. You may see him on a ballot in the future.
Yeah, I'm just going to call it out. You sound like
I hope
you
Walz
see the
runs.
end here.
I don't. I do think that, obviously we're disappointed about North Carolina and Georgia because there was a real feeling that there was such a good ground game compared to what the Trump
And to be
team
clear,
was
we
doing.
haven't called those.
No, we haven't. But I'm looking internally at the numbers, and they're not as hopeful as I would like them to be. I still think we have a path, obviously, in the blue wall states. I don't think anybody knows how Nevada is going to turn out. And I think that is another one. We could have 4 states that determine the presidency that are all decided by less than a half a point.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that.
That's so 2024, Senator.
How's that?
Right now, we want to go to Peter Alexander at Harris headquarters to really gauge the temperature in the room. Peter?
Well, we're outside and it's a loud one here, but I can tell you if you get into the crowd here, it's particularly quiet in terms of their sense of optimism right now. That's how one Harris ally just described it to me a short time ago. I ran into a longtime Democratic source, a person who was close to the Harris campaign, and I asked them what they make of the results they've seen so far. They said, honestly, this is not looking so good for us, but then they quickly put on a smile and said, but you know what? We just got to keep smiling for the night. That may give you a better understanding of where they feel like things may be going right now. It remains early, a lot of votes still to count, but I'll tell you what I just heard from a Democratic lawmaker right now who just wrote me in part, quote, it's pretty concerning. I just keep reminding myself that 8 years ago, all the trends in the first few hours showed Hillary winning, and then she didn't. But obviously, this is not the return we were looking for. It gives you a little sense of the way that some of those people supporting Kamala Harris are feeling this evening right now. Again, a lot of numbers, a lot of data still to be counted right now. But as Claire McCaskill said a short time ago, some of the early results we're seeing in some of those places, North Carolina, Georgia, are not looking as positive as the Harris campaign had been hoping. It doesn't mean that they still don't have a path, but it does certainly increasingly mean that they'd have to succeed in holding on to that blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And frankly, speaking to some people in some of those states that are involved with the Harris campaign, they said that's where they are seeing some concern that that's going to be a tightrope that they have to still try to walk tonight. Buster.
Now let's go to our battlegrounds. Pennsylvania, too close to call, 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock in the West. Same.
Democratic Party was allowed itself to just organize itself being an anti-Trump party. And in some ways, so focused on creating an anti-Trump coalition, they stopped being a political party, right, to come up with.
Pennsylvania at this hour, 79% of the vote in, too close to call. We've talked a lot about the different counties and whether there's enough
in the comments
for Kamala
if Chuck
Harris
Todd
to
has
make
a
up
job.
where she's lost in some of the rural areas. Let's go to Michigan, too close to call there as well, but a lot more vote to be counted. In Wisconsin, let's see how much we've got there. About two-thirds of the vote or so, too close to call. In Georgia, we're getting close to a close there, but they do count their votes fast there, and it's 91% in, but we will see what happens. Too close to call. North Carolina, too early to call. We will wait and see what happens there, but again, starting to see 88% of the vote coming in there. Let's go out west, Arizona, too early to call. Polls closed about 2.5 hours ago there.
Put the wrong one
Looks like
up
we have
there.
a projected winner. This just came in right now. Okay, North Carolina, Donald Trump is the projected winner. You see the margin there, 136,000. So Donald Trump improved on his margin by back of the envelope math, 50,000 votes there in North Carolina. That's going to be a real disappointment for the Kamala Harris campaign. They had hoped that if North Carolina
pretty quick.
could be clawed back into the blue column, perhaps that would open up other paths for them out west, a Sunbelt path. It is looking like blue wall or bust. That is where it stands right now, 172 electoral votes for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in the lead right now.
Let's go to Tom.
Remove it anymore. This number before we called North Carolina, Harris had more paths than Trump did. But this is essentially where we started the night. This is the way it ended in 2020, right? He won North Carolina. President Biden had won the rest of the battleground states. But this gives the Republicans and former President Trump some hope. We now move to Georgia. We're going to be looking at the vote in Georgia. But as Chuck mentioned, very, very...
What it seems to be the way this night is going to go for most folks here. It's not the end of the road. Jen O'Malley Dillon also saying we're going to keep at it tomorrow. But we wait to hear from Kamala Harris, of course, in the course of the next couple of hours. We'll let you know.
Jen, a moment like this, now we know earlier in the evening they were trying to keep them in line and all this, but now you're at a point where you have no control.
You don't, but you need to keep the campaign team's spirits up because they're continuing to talk to voters and counsel people who may have questions. And they're still a part of this big team that's been working to elect Kamala Harris. They don't have control, but the end has not happened yet. And so they need to keep them all, their spirits up. That's the goal.
You say the end hasn't happened yet. I mean, do you still hold out hope that there's a path? I mean, a reasonable path?
Well, look, I think it becomes, as I said earlier, more and more challenging as more results come in and you see that the blue wall looks like the primary possible path. And as you see her underperforming Biden in a number of these counties, that makes it more challenging. Now, there are still, if you talk to Democrats, which I have, they believe there are votes that are still coming in Philadelphia. There are still votes coming in cities. That's often how these nights go. So I'm a believer you got to wait until you know. That's what happens internally here as well. But yes, if you're on the campaign right now, you're feeling pretty down because there are places you wanted to have in your win column to give you more space and breathing room, and you don't have them in this moment.
As we talk about...
Welcome back. If you have stepped away or heard parts of the conversation, know that this race is not over. This is the road to 270. That, of course, the magic number. Donald Trump right now leading with 230, Harris with 189.
Ground states. Almost the whole game is Wayne County. It's Detroit. Not enough vote there. About a quarter of the vote is in. We can't really make any projections or calls here because so much of that vote is out.
How much he picked
but just
up.
to give you an idea of where Biden was in 2020, again, a lot of this vote is out, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but 68% tonight right now, Harris at this point in time is at 58%. Not a great number for her.
Harris.
It is a Democrats. I also want to talk about Washtenaw. This is the University of Michigan. Go Big Blue if you're a fan out there. 71% of the vote is in. Remember, this is a college county. Democrats have to do very well here. Biden, 72%. Tonight, Harris is underperforming right now with almost three quarters of the vote in Ingham County. Again, another college county. This is where Michigan State is. Half the vote is in. Biden was at 65. Harris is at 56.9. I want to see some Trump.
Lester, it's starting to get a lot quieter in this tabulation center, and that's because for the most part, they're almost done here. We're told by election officials. Tonight, Lester, it seems like we're seeing a very different Georgia than what we saw in 2022. Lester.
All right.
Because we're looking at an exit poll that shows Latino men broke for Trump by 10 points. They went for Biden by 23. That's a 33-point swing. How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, I think all of us are trying to make sense of that. Look, this is one exit poll, so I'm not prepared to draw complete conclusions from this. But I think it's safe to say, right, we've seen enough evidence that there was a significant shift among Latinos.
We've got to make a call here, Secretary. This is NBC News projection in the state of Georgia. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win in Georgia when all the votes are counted.
I was pretty sure
There's
it was
the
over
breakdown right now, 118,000 vote
on election
margin.
night.
But again, Donald Trump, the projected winner. This is a big call here on a night in which we've waited quite some time for some of these important battleground calls. Here's what the road to 270 looks like. Donald Trump drawing closer now to that magic number. He's at 246, Harris at 189.
Well, this means it's blue wall or bust for Kamala Harris. It's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, or there is no path to 270 for her. So we'll continue to keep an eye on this as we await results.
And welcome back. That news is sinking in that Georgia will go into the Donald Trump column here tonight. Certainly a major piece on and putting Donald Trump even closer to that magic 270.
I was just looking over at Tom, who's doing the back of the envelope math here. So
I'm gaming
show
up
us
the
our
scenario
math.
here. I just want to make this very simple for us here and also our viewers at home. So we projected Georgia and North Carolina. For former President Trump to go back to the White House, look at his number right here, 252. If he wins Pennsylvania, he's going back to the White House, 271. It's coming down to Pennsylvania right now for Republicans. What the math changes now for Kamala Harris, right? Because now she no longer has a Sun Belt strategy. She's lost Georgia. She's lost North Carolina. If she wins the entire blue wall, yes, she'll go back to the White House. That is still an option for her. Listen, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. She has to win all three. But it looks like this is the entire game for her right now, guys. By losing North Carolina, losing Georgia, things have just gotten much easier for former President Trump. We're going to be watching Pennsylvania more than ever before right now because those 19 electoral votes will put him over the top if we project that state for him. Guys?
It feels like 2016. Honestly, it feels like 2016.
he's going to cry.
And just the path becoming smaller and smaller. There are still votes to be counted, and we saw a lot of enthusiasm today. And so it's possible that you have significant election day voting that could change this. But what I've noticed is just in county after county in Pennsylvania that he's been overperforming and that she's been underperforming what Biden and Trump did in 2020. And that's, for Democrats has to be worrisome.
I hate to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but we have a call in the U.S. Senate that will change the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. NBC News now calling GOP control of the Senate.
That's with the... All right, we want to go to Harris headquarters, Cedric Richmond, who is, of course, the head of the DNC, about to address the crowd there. Let's listen in.
Good evening, Howard. Good evening, H. I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for being here. We still have votes to count.
Yeah, we got to count.
We still have states that have not been called yet.
It's fine.
So you won't hear from the vice president tonight. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris.
And go home.
Thank you all.
Richmond, who is, of course, the co-chair of the Harris campaign, I misspoke earlier. Apologies for that, saying that we will not hear from Kamala Harris tonight, but we will hear from her tomorrow. We've got...
I think it's important to note this is a different year. There are still votes to be counted. None of those battleground states have been counted, but it feels eerily similar to 2016.
The parallels are really striking.
There's the side-by-side picture. If you were just tuning into all this, I think the pictures speak loudly. On the left, the Harris campaign headquarters for the night as people are packing up and leaving, told they will not see the candidate tonight as they process some unhelpful trends for them. On the right side, the Trump gathering in West Palm Beach tonight, where we have seen dancing and celebration. Again, the race has not been called yet, but they, like everyone else watching some interesting trend lines, have seemed to be pointing in that direction. We'll take a break here.
Savannah, we did just hear from Cedric Richmond making the announcement to the thousands who had gathered here. Frankly, many of them had already left as we approached 1 o'clock, saying that they would not hear from the Vice President Kamala Harris tonight, instead saying that she would speak to her supporters, not just here at Howard University, her alma mater, but to the nation as well, in an address that would take place at some point tomorrow. No specifics on when that would occur. A lot of votes still out there. No plans for any concessions, certainly at this point. But I can tell you in conversations we've had with a series of individuals, including a Democrat who was attending a donor event that was taking place at one of the glitzy hotels not far from where we are here in Washington, D.C. They say the atmosphere there was like a funeral. Another person said that the situation, in their words, was just, quote, not good right now. We did hear earlier from Jen O'Malley Dillon. She is the campaign chair. She had what was in effect a sort of pep talk for the forces, the campaign staff, telling them all to get some sleep and that they would come back and finish this off strong tomorrow. So that's effectively where things are at the end of the evening. But I got to tell you, Savannah, on a day when so many those close to Kamala Harris really felt like they had the momentum, they felt like the vibes were on their side, it quickly appeared clear that, despite her effort to say that we're not going back, that they may be returning to the figures that haunted Democrats back in 2016, where they just didn't have enough to defeat Donald Trump that go around. So many blank stares, glum faces, people.
It's wonderful.
Not so much holding back tears, but certainly unable to crack a smile here. They had been handing out American flags early on. As some of the early numbers were out, they were cheering and waving those flags. But as the night progressed and they watched the returns come in, no more waving flags. In fact, they asked for the television to be muted here with the returns, with the exception of Hawaii, Colorado, other places that Harris won. They turned them on and got cheers for that. Instead, they blasted music to try to sort of distract from the situation, try to give a little pick-me-up to the people here.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. Want to go over to Gary.
It sounds like somebody's died.
Yeah, Savannah, Trump supporters reveling in the news that they're getting here in this ballroom just over the last half hour or so. Huge cheers in this room as the network's called Georgia for the former president, and a loud chorus of boos when Cedric Richmond took the stage in Washington to announce that Vice President Harris would not be speaking. There has been movement from Mar-a-Lago across the Intercoastal Waterway towards West Palm Beach.
Gulf of
Trump
America.
Supporters, the party there emptying out a lot of the folks he had been with, Governor Burgum, for example, other close Trump aides and allies making their way across the street. Still no sign of the former president here yet, Savannah.
Philadelphia County, this is where she closed out her campaign with Lady Gaga and Oprah as well. There's still a lot of vote left to be counted, 20% or so. 81% was where Biden was at. She's at 78. And finally, Bucks County here. Trump has flipped this right now. There's still about 30% of the vote is out, 69%. He had 51. Biden did in 2020. Trump tonight with 50%. Still some vote to be counted there. But those aren't promising numbers in the collar counties right now. And the bellwethers, one in the east, one in the west, showing signs that Pennsylvania could turn red. Still a lot of vote out, guys. But this may be one of the reasons, and we don't know why Vice President Harris decided not to speak tonight, but this may be one of the reasons why the trend lines in Pennsylvania, from what we're seeing, if she doesn't win Pennsylvania, there is no longer a path for her.
Right. And you're seeing some
counties. Trump is overperforming. Harris is underperforming the counties she needs to win, guys.
Remember, if she doesn't win Pennsylvania, the other states don't matter. If he wins Pennsylvania, he goes to the White House.
Right.
That's right.
Whether it's a call or not, it functionally is. I don't know. The minute if we call Pennsylvania tonight, does he get to 270? I think so. Yeah,
That's right.
That's
right. That's right. It's ball game. I mean, that's it. So.
And they're counting fast in Pennsylvania tonight as well. We're coming.
Scoring 270 electoral votes.
Okay, let's see the battlegrounds. Pennsylvania, we just discussed
Too close,
it.
92%.
Too close to call right
There's
now.
no way
with
they'd come back.
92% of the vote in. Same story in Michigan, but we've been discussing how some of the trend lines are not positive for the vice president tonight. Michigan too close to call.
Bucks County goes, we go.
It's over.
And we spent more time and resources there, and the Harris campaign did too. They had huge operations on the ground. The fact that they're not going to win Bucks County is really difficult and starts to say to folks, hey, we have a problem here. The other thing is there just may not be enough turnout in Philly to get there. And I've spent my entire adult life waiting for Philly to come in. I just have anger. I hate the Eagles.
All right, relax.
Now click like and subscribe. Comment on this thing.
Donald Trump has always been underestimated by Democrats and has always figured out a way to juice turnout in ways that we thought were both abhorrent and didn't make sense to Democrats, but clearly has worked tonight. And this is that was a story of 2016, and it is a story of tonight.
You know what's interesting to me?
Any word on whether we will hear from the former president?
Of course.
We will, Savannah, and soon, I'm told by a campaign official, Donald Trump is on his way across from Mar-a-Lago to here in West Palm Beach, and he is expected to speak soon. Now, what soon means is a little bit of open to interpretation, but Trump himself made it very clear earlier today, he does not have a lot of patience with this vote counting process. He wants this to be over tonight. He thought earlier today it would be over tonight. And it was his desire to speak tonight. This ballroom is full. Secret Service starting to kind of close the doors. Urge
Secret
people
Service,
to get in.
they're amping it up.
The music, Savannah. I do not think it will be long until we hear from former President Trump.
And that will be an interesting situation because if assuming the status quo exists, he will not have been called as the next president.
Well, we will recall that he declared victory in 2020 when, in fact,
it's worth zooming out a little bit and just acknowledging.
It was around this point where I saw a tweet that said Secret Service has been ordered to increase Donald Trump's manpower immediately. So they knew it was over.
The history-making moment that we are witnessing.
What do you think of your old boss, former Vice President Mike Pence, is thinking? He did not endorse Donald Trump, and of course, famously, did his constitutional duty on January 6th to the chance of hang Mike Pence. What do you think he's thinking right now?
I think he's probably thinking about it from a policy standpoint. I mean, the campaign is over. That decision has been made by the American people, and so I think and was elected by the people of America to be the president of the United States.
Claire, you had a thought?
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people will be looking at is the military. We have a civilian-controlled military in the United States, but there is a deep ethos in the military, especially in the leadership, about the separation of politics and the military. And
military
Trump at
loves
times
Trump.
tried to blur that line and was frustrated, I think, because he could not get the military to do what he thought they ought to do when they ought to do it sometimes. So I think it will be interesting to see how the Pentagon handles this, because there are so many strong leaders in our military, and they have come up through the ranks, and they have transferred their families all over the world, and they have learned every part of military leadership. And I think there could be some bumps in the road as to how he handles the military and who he puts in charge,
or his campaign. And
we've got an important call to make here.
Here we go.
Moments away from calling one of the key battlegrounds.
Yes, NBC News can now project that Donald Trump will win in the state of Pennsylvania. 19 electoral votes. Here's where it stands right now. Donald Trump out in front. Difference of 188,000
blue wall is now the red
votes.
wall.
95% of the vote in Pennsylvania, and that goes in the Donald Trump column.
And with that, it's expected that he will have the 270 votes he needs. I see you puzzling over there. It's because of Nebraska.
I was looking there going, okay, am I going crazy?
No.
Because we haven't called Alaska yet, and that's why it's 266. But once Alaska gets called and Nebraska, you can see former President Trump, he had to get to 270. He's likely to get to 272, if not higher. We still haven't called Wisconsin or Michigan as well, but he is on his way. NBC News projecting him on his way back to the White House.
And we were told, right now, I'm not quite sure what they're listening to, but they have been partying for quite some time.
Well, this is history. Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States, as he was the 45th president of the United States, with the convincing sweep of several battleground states. Several battleground states still not decided, but the magic number of 270 electoral votes has been reached. Seen at Trump headquarters in West Palm Beach, as Donald J. Trump once again will assume the presidency on January 20th. The United States Senate will be in Republican hands. Democrats have lost control of the Senate, and the fate of the House of Representatives, currently in Republican hands, also in question. Democrats just need.
You heard from them, of course. It was Cedric Richmond taking the stage. That memo had suggested to staffers, listen, we've got the blue wall. We're going to wait and see turnout in Philadelphia. We have now called Pennsylvania. That is incredibly significant here. And so do we hear from, if not her, as we don't expect to, the campaign tonight? And then obviously, what are we going to hear when former President Trump himself takes the stage there down in Palm Beach?
And will she call him to concede? I mean, that's my question.
But there was, in some ways, an air of inevitability around Hillary Clinton that just didn't exist around Kamala Harris. She wasn't even supposed to be on the top of this ticket 6 months ago, right? So it was a very different vibe coming into this. She talked about, and her campaign cast her as the underdog here in this race, not as the sort of heir apparent, if you will. So there is
Trump's. This election obviously dramatically changes things for both parties. And with that,
fixing my hair, look what the cat dragged in. We had a late night, well, I believe you call it an early morning. Donald Trump will return to the White House. That's the headline. The 47th president of the United States, the now president-elect for a second time, right now sitting at 276 electoral votes. The state of Wisconsin putting him over the top officially here at NBC News about an hour ago.
Just a couple of minutes ago. I'm thinking, is there any battleground county where she outperformed Joe Biden?
Nope.
Is there a single battleground county where she actually did better than President Biden did here? So I checked in with a source. You may know him, Steve Granacki. There's a couple, the suburbs of Atlanta and like one county in Pennsylvania, but overwhelmingly, there is not a place where she did better than Joe Biden in this race.
And I think Hallie hits on a really critical point. Democrats are waking up this morning and asking, what do they need to do to win again?
Stop being lunatics.
Put it to me this way: there needs to be a reckoning that the current leadership needs to think seriously about not just passing the baton, but talking about politics differently and finding and meeting voters where they are. This lawmaker said, right now we're not doing that. And
liberalism
that is why
a mental
Donald
disorder.
Trump won.
A vice president to an unpopular president running for essentially a second term
is almost never successful.
And trying to figure out how to navigate some distance from him while still being unwilling to break from him completely. That was part of it, too.
It was the biggest challenge of her campaign.
Well, we'll have hours to discuss it.
Yes, we will. All right, guys, let's turn.
Last night at Howard University, Kamala Harris's alma mater, it started as sort of a joyful, optimistic scene, but as the results came in, as polls closed around the country, the scene there really dramatically changed quickly. A much more somber scene, glum looks, blank faces staring at the giant screen there. Ultimately, they turned off the audio on the massive monitor and turned music on to try to buoy the spirits of those in attendance. We do expect to hear, as you noted, from Vice President Harris at some point later today, speaking at Howard University, we were told, both to her supporters and to address the nation as well. There was a party elsewhere in town for her donors. The situation there was described as a funeral.
So let's look at that. For all of the talk about the polling ties, in the end, this is a pretty decisive victory for Donald Trump. Take us inside it.
Yeah, a couple ways to look at it, Savannah. You see some of these battlegrounds still, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, not called. Trump is ahead in all three of those. There's a very good chance Trump is going to go 7 for 7 in the core battleground states.
Won them all.
But the victory he's put up here goes beyond those battleground states. These are the electoral votes. Let's flip it over and show you what the popular vote looks like right now. And you can see Trump right now, with an outright majority of the popular vote, an advantage of more than 5 million votes nationally over Kamala Harris. And where that comes from is some states we don't talk about much, but big states, states like New York. Now, Kamala Harris is going to win here by about 11 points, but just check out what this is in terms of a difference from 2020. That's cut in half from Joe Biden's margin. If you looked inside New York City here, especially the working class areas, the outer boroughs of New York City.
The Bronx.
There you go. Some major
It cost each American $30,000
have really kind of been
per
unthinkable
family
for Republicans for a long time. You see it, too, these kinds of gains in a state like New Jersey. You see it in a state like Maryland. They're still blue, but they're a lot less blue. You see it in a state like Illinois. Look at this one, 51-47. We're over 90% of the vote. And Harris is going to win. She's not winning like Joe Biden did just 4 years ago. 17 points right there. So you start getting those gains for Donald Trump in those big blue states. I mean, that adds up to millions of votes. That's why he has this popular vote advantage. That's why I think there's a very good chance he's going to end up winning the popular vote for the first time. And it would be the first time in 20 years since George W. Bush, 2004, that a Republican has won the national popular vote.
All right, Steve.
All right, guys, if you like the content, click on here for some more, and we'll see you next time.